Station Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center. This team here tonight is being led by Scott Stover. He is the flight director for this Orbit 3 team. This team has been watching over the systems on board the orbiting complex, which will welcome this HTV-3 in about a week. The crew right now is currently in their sleep period. They are due to wake up in about 5 hours and 44 minutes. Right now at the Tanegashima Space Center, the HTV-3 sits atop its H-2B rocket. The weather in the area is doing fairly well. They are expecting and taking a look at some lightning that may or may not be in the area at the time of our launch, but we'll keep our eye on that. But the rocket is fueled and ready to go. This evening's launch time is 9:06 p.m. Central Time, 10:06 p.m. Eastern Time. The HTV-3 is a 16.5-ton cargo carrier that serves the International Space Station. It is bringing up almost 4 tons of supplies and experiment hardware to the crew. You see the breakdown of the different sections of the HTV-3 here. At the far right-hand side, or at the bottom of the cargo carrier, is the propulsion module. It's about 6.5 feet long and carries all of the fuel for HTV. There are 4 propellant tanks that carry 2 tons of fuel on each flight. There are 4 main thrusters located at the bottom of the propulsion module, along with 16 reaction control system thrusters that help fine-tune HTV's flight. Another 12 thrusters are located at the top of the HTV for a total of 28. Beside the propulsion module is the avionics module, which contains the guidance, navigation, and control system, as well as the communications, data handling, and electrical power systems. All of these systems combined together help the HTV fly on its own during the trip up to the International Space Station, which, as we mentioned, takes about a week. That avionics module is about 4 feet long, which gives you a sense of exactly how big this cargo carrier actually is. The next section is the unpressurized cargo hold. It measures about 11.5 feet long and has a wide opening that accommodates the exposed pallet, which you see diagrammed there. This pallet is the large tray. It looks just like a drawer that carries on it several different pieces of equipment that are installed on various portions of the International Space Station. The exposed pallet has what's called an FRGF, which is a flight releasable grapple fixture. It's a very fancy title for the piece of equipment that's on it that the station's robotic arm grabs onto, and that's what allows it to be withdrawn from the HTV itself. On the far left-hand side is the pressurized logistics carrier. This is at the very top of the HTV. This section's almost 11 feet long and carries all of the cargo that is used on board the station. There's a hatch on one end of the HTV, the far left-hand side. That is what the crew will use to get access to the cargo carrier to actually go inside and unload it. Inside it are different resupply racks that have different cargo bags attached to them. That is how all the different cargo is secured inside this cargo carrier, and that is what the crew will actually be unhooking and opening up and unloading all the different cargo over a series of days. Once again, a live view of this H-2B rocket with the HTV up on top of it. As we mentioned, the rocket is fully fueled. That happened about 6.5 hours ago. The Japanese control team there, both in Tanegashima and also at the Scuba Control Center just outside of Tokyo, are reporting that everything looks good to go for this evening's launch here, once again, at 9:06 p.m. Central Time, 10:06 p.m. Eastern Time. The HTV-3 actually has an extended ascent profile, meaning that it takes a little bit longer to get into orbit than some of the other spacecraft that we cover here on NASA television. Typically, that's about 8 or 9 minutes. It takes about a little more than 15 minutes for HTV-3 to get up into orbit. So once again, liftoff will occur at 9:06 p.m. Central Time. And then at 1 minute and 54 seconds into the flight, that is when the 4 solid rocket boosters will burn out. That point in the flight, the rocket will be more than 30 miles high. A few seconds after that, at 2 minutes and 4 seconds into the flight, the first pair of solid rocket boosters will jettison themselves, followed just a few seconds later by the second pair. So this is unlike other vehicles where the SRBs come off all at the same time. These come off in pairs, so it's quite a spectacular sight to see if you've ever seen one of these HTV launches. At 3 minutes and 40 seconds into the flight, about 75 miles up, the fairing that protects the HTV will be jettisoned, and at that point, HTV-3 will be exposed. Then at 5 minutes and 47 seconds, that is when the first stage engine will cut off. And then at 5:54, the first and second stages will separate from one another. At 6 minutes and 1 second into the flight, that is when the second stage engine will ignite. And then it will burn for pretty much the remainder of the flight up until the 14-minute and 20-second mark. That is when it will be cut off. And then, as we mentioned, at 15 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, that is when HTV-3 will separate. Its preliminary orbit is 200 kilometers by 300 kilometers, which equates to 124 by 186 miles. As you see this liftoff occur here coming up in a little less than 45 minutes, you will notice that the HTV-3, along with its H-2B rocket, will do a pitch maneuver, much like what the shuttle used to do. It will be heading to an azimuth, which is basically the angle at which it flies into space, at 108.5 degrees. So you will see that happen with this giant rocket. The HTV control team there in Japan has notified the flight director here in Houston, Scott Stover, that they're going to be doing the go, no-go for the Houston team a little bit earlier than expected. So Stover is talking with his team now, just making sure that everybody is ready to support the flight, and that everything here in Houston and at our other partner centers are green down the board. As you can see from this live view of the Tanegashima Space Center, the HTV-3 and its H-2B rocket definitely do not lack for a view there at the Space Center and this launch pad. The Space Center was created in 1969 when the original National Space Development Agency of Japan was formed. It later on became JAXA, the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. But the HTV will be lifting off from launch pad number 2 there, which has been the site of the other HTVs. Of course, this is the third HTV that has flown. The first one was September 10th, 2009. That was the liftoff date for the maiden voyage of this huge cargo carrier. The second one was in January 22nd of 2011, so a little more than a year and a half ago. Once again, our launch, 9:06 p.m. Central Time, 10:06 p.m. Eastern Time. Everything is looking good to go. Everything is reporting green from the NASA side and all of its partner agencies. As we mentioned, Scott Stover has just wrapped up talking to the other control centers around the world, including the Columbus Control Center. And once he receives word from the Moscow Control Center, we should be able to give a report to the JAXA colleagues that everything is good to go from the standpoint of our side. As you can tell, this H-2B rocket is just huge. It stands 186 feet tall and is a two-stage rocket, as we were talking about a few minutes ago during the ascent profile. You see the breakdown of the rocket there with the HTV up at the top, the payload fairing which covers it. It uses liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen as propellants. There are 4 strap-on solid rocket boosters on the side of the rocket to help power the flight during the first couple of minutes. There are 2 liquid-fueled engines on the bottom of the first stage as well, which you see as those LE-7A engines. Tonight's launch will begin a week-long process of getting the HTV-3 up to the International Space Station. The capture of the cargo carrier itself is scheduled for July 27th, 1 week from now. HTV-3 will fly pretty much the exact same flight profile that the other 2 HTVs did, as well as something very similar to what the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft did. Joe Acaba, who is part of Expedition 32 at this point in time, will be responsible for operating the station's robotic arm to reach out and grab onto the HTV-3. Once that takes place, Aki Hoshide will take over, and he'll be responsible for installing it to the Harmony node, which is the home of HTV-3. Sunday Williams will be providing some backup operations, helping the crew with anything that is needed. Scott Stover has just informed the HTV controls team and our counterparts over in Japan that the team here is officially go for the launch of the HTV-3, so everything is looking good to go from all the different control centers around the world. So again, once HTV-3 arrives at the station on the 27th, the crew will actually open up the hatches and go inside the pressurized section on the 28th, the very next day. They will extract that large exposed pallet, which is the drawer that carries experiments on top of it, on August the 6th. You see a couple of the different experiments that are there. The Space Communications and Navigation Test Bed, which is a NASA experiment. It's called SCAN. That will be later on installed on Express Logistics Carrier number 3, which you see out there on the left-hand side of the station. It's a little bit misleading because it looks like it's on the right-hand side of your picture, but the station actually flies with the U.S. segment forward, so technically it is the port or left-hand side. That ELC3 is up on top. That will be the home of the scan test bed. What this does is basically take a look at whether different types of radios that are used on board the International Space Station can be reprogrammed using software. Typically, radios are very specific to the job they are designed for. If you change the mode of operation of a radio, you basically just have to fly up a brand new piece of hardware. So, of course, with space being a little bit difficult to get to, it's important to find out if these radios can be reconfigured and operated differently with different configurations just using a quick software upload. So that is what SCAN will take a look at. The second experiment that's on that exposed pallet is what's called the Multi-Mission Consolidated Equipment Experiment, which you see there. That is a Japanese experiment. It is basically 5 small mission payloads that are focusing on different types of science and technological demonstrations. These include 2 atmospheric observation investigations that study lightning and what's called resonant scattering from plasma and air glow. That's just the residual sort of reflection and lighting that the atmosphere has whenever the crew is flying over the Earth in the dark. There's also 3 technological demonstration investigations as part of that MCE, including an inflatable structure deployment, robotic tether movement, and they're also going to be testing a high-definition television camera up there in space. So again, that exposed pallet will be extracted on the 6th of August. It will be installed on the Kibo Laboratories external payload. That's basically just the front porch of Kibo on the 10th. And then coming up September the 5th, that is when the crew will back out of the HTV-3, close it up. Operations will be done at that point, and then it will unberth and depart on September the 6th. A good look at those solid rocket boosters there on the side of the HTV-3's rocket, the H2B. Again, those will burn out at the 1 minute 54 second mark. That is when the first pair will be jettisoned just a few seconds later, about 10 seconds at 2:04. And then the second pair will be jettisoned 3 seconds later at 2:07. Just 33 minutes and counting until the launch of the HTV-3. The weather there a little bit hazy, as you can tell. We talked about some lightning that they were taking a look at in the area. We've received no reports that is occurring, but we'll keep our eye on the weather there and just pass that along to you as we hear it. The latest weather update there from the Tanegashima Space Center is 83.1 degree Fahrenheit in terms of the temperature. And, of course, cloudy, as you can tell from the cameras there. The rollout of the HTV-3 aboard its H-2B rocket occurred this morning. It took just a few minutes to roll out, which began at about 5:30 a.m. Central Time to roll it out to the pad. It took right at 18 minutes to get this rocket out to its launch position. The rocket and the spacecraft itself had been prepared inside the vehicle assembly building there at the Tanegashima Space Center. It's about 400 meters from that building to the launch pad. The rocket has moved atop a movable launcher, which serves as the launch pad as well. There are two special transporters named Dolly that move the entire pad out all at once. Each dolly has 56 tires, and the unique thing is that each dolly can move front, back, or even rotate sideways if it needs to be, so it's pretty flexible and can move that rocket into the proper position to get it ready for launch. As we mentioned, fueling began about 7 hours ago, and everything went smoothly during that process. Launch still on target for 9:06 p.m. Central Time, 10:06 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, the weather right at 83 degrees Fahrenheit, cloudy, and they are keeping their eye on that as we count down these final 30 minutes. We're now at T-minus 29 minutes and 23 seconds. You can see the launch pad there being hosed down with water. That is standard protocol. It keeps dust and debris down and also helps sort of calm down some of the acoustic energy that comes off the rocket at the moment of ignition. Very similar to what we used to do with the shuttle on the launch pad. There was a deluge system that would just dump tons of water down. It's a fairly effective way of dampening out some of the energy that comes off these rockets. As a piece of historic trivia for you, it was 1 year ago tonight that we were actually in deorbit preparation on STS-135. The crew was just a couple of hours away from getting Atlantis and themselves ready to return home at the conclusion of that very successful mission, of course, bringing to a close the more than 30-year space shuttle program. So just 1 short year ago, we were witnessing history as the space shuttle program got ready to come to a close there with that crew you see there: Rex Walheim, Doug Hurley, Chris Ferguson, and Sandy Magnus, part of that historic crew.
X-25 分。
This is Mission Control, Houston. We're at T-minus 22 minutes and 45 seconds before the launch of the HTV-3 cargo carrier. Launch time 9:06 p.m. Central Time, 10:06 p.m. Eastern Time. As we take a look at the dates that are ahead for the crew of the Expedition 32 as well as this HTV-3, as we mentioned, this begins about a week-long journey up to the station. July 27th, next Friday evening, that is when the capture and berthing will take place on board the International Space Station. Joe Acaba will be in charge of that activity. He'll be using the station's robotic arm to reach out and grab on to the cargo carrier itself. Once that happens, Aki Hoshide will be in charge of moving it on in and installing HTV-3. Once that takes place the following day, that is when the crew will open up the hatches and take a look inside the cargo carrier. That is on July 28th. And on August 6th, that is when the exposed pallet will be extracted from that middle portion of the HTV-3 that we showed you at the beginning of our broadcast. They'll install it on the front porch of the Cubo module coming up on August 10th. And then September 5th, that is when they will button up the HTV-3. It will be uninstalled on September the 6th. And then shortly after that, it will be sent into a destructive reentry into the Earth's atmosphere. Another item of note coming up on Sunday, this crew has just had an incredibly busy time since they've been on board the station. That will not change. Sunday, the Progress 47 will undock from the Pierce docking compartment of the International Space Station. It will back out to a distance of about 100 miles. That's about 160 kilometers back behind the station. And then on Monday, it will reapproach the station to test out brand new Coors system components that were installed inside the station. That Coors system is what allows the Progress and the Soyuz to perform automated rendezvous and dockings with the orbiting complex. There's some new equipment that they're going to be testing out both inside the station and actually on the vehicle itself with a brand new antenna configuration. This will hopefully allow the Progress and the Soyuz to perform these automated dockings with fewer antennas. We're going to have live coverage of this activity coming up on Sunday beginning at 3 p.m. Central Time here on NASA television, with the actual undocking taking place at 3:27. And then on Monday, beginning at 8:15 p.m. Central Time, that is when we will return with live coverage of the redocking of the Progress 47 back again to the Pierce docking compartment. That redocking will occur at 8:57 p.m. Central Time. Then a week later, beginning at 1 p.m. Central Time, that is when the final undocking will occur of that Progress 47 with its job being finished up. And then at 1:11, that is when the actual undocking itself will take place. And then on August 1st, the very next day, 2 days later, that is when the Progress 48 will launch. At launch time at 2:35 p.m. Central Time, our launch coverage will begin at 2:15. If you notice there, that Progress is going to be docking the same day as it heads up to the International Space Station. The Russians are going to compress that timeline. Typically, it takes about 2 days for Progress and Soyuz to get up to the station, but they're going to be doing it same day. So quite a maneuver to watch as we bring you live coverage of all of this here on NASA television. This is Mission Control Houston, T-minus 16 minutes and 20 seconds and counting until the launch of the HTV-3 cargo carrier on a mission toward the International Space Station. As we mentioned, there's 4 tons of supplies flying on this particular flight. 61% of that are spare parts, 15% is food, 20% is science experiments, and 4% is crew supplies. On previous missions, they have flown some water up to the station. Last time it was about, I think, 2 to 3% water. There is none on this particular mission. The crew is all set in terms of their water needs. Majority of this is spare parts for the station itself, as well as some food for the crew and some experiment hardware. Launch time tonight is going to be 9:06 and 16 seconds on the dot. It'll take 15 minutes and 11 seconds for HTV-3 to get up into orbit. That orbit originally is going to be 124 by 186 miles. That'll be fine-tuned over the next several days as the cargo carrier closes in on the orbiting complex. T-minus 14 minutes and 11 seconds and counting before the launch. A quick update for you on our official launch time. The visiting vehicle officer has updated us. It is 9:06 and 18 seconds. That time was fine-tuned by 2 seconds since the station performed a reboost of its altitude back on Wednesday. So again, 9:06 and 18 seconds. We'll get confirmation from the flight controllers here once we have lifted off this evening. But 13 minutes and 45 seconds and counting. T-minus 12 minutes and counting. Everything still looking green down the board in terms of all the teams' readiness to support the launch. The rocket's in good shape. It's fully fueled, as we mentioned, about 7 hours ago. That's when that took place. The liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen was pumped into this rocket. As you can see, it's venting there. The Expedition 32 crew on board the station is currently in their sleep period. They've got a little more than 5 hours before they're going to wake up. Of course, they'll be getting an update on their daily planning conference, which they have just a couple of hours after wake up, where they talk to the different ground teams around the world. But they will no doubt have some questions about the status of this rocket and this cargo carrier that is heading their way. Once again, Joe Akaba, Aki Hoshide are two primary people that will be responsible for capturing HTV-3 and installing it to the station's Harmony node.
We would like to inform you of a final go no-go decision.
現在、各系ともロケット打ち上げの最終作業を実施中です。また、警戒区域の安全が確認されており、気象条件も打ち上げに支障のないことが確認されました。
All systems are now in final operations. All safety measures were confirmed in restricted areas. Also, the weather conditions were examined and confirmed.
従いまして、宇宙ステーション補給機コウノトリ3号機 HTV-3 を搭載した H2B ロケット3号機の打ち上げを本日日本時間の午前11時6分18秒に実施します。
As a result, we are to launch the H2B launch vehicle number 3 with the HTV-3 named Konoto on board at 11:06:18 a.m. Japan Standard Time.
So an update there from the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency saying that everything is go to launch the HTV-3. We're at T-minus 9 minutes and 7 seconds and counting. Official launch time will be 9:06 and 18 seconds Central Time. That is 11:06 and 18 seconds there at the launch pad. There's several clouds in the area. The temperature's about 83 degrees. Humidity's fairly high, as you can tell from some of that vapor there at the bottom of the launch pad, both coming off the rocket and some of the mist coming off the sea there. T-minus 8 minutes and counting. This will be a 15-minute and 11-second trip into orbit for HTV-3.
秒読みが開始されました。
It's 8 minutes to launch. The final terminal countdown starts.
470
種子島宇宙センター滝崎総合司令塔から H2B ロケット3号機の打ち上げ状況をお伝えしております。
This is a live report of the HTV launch vehicle number 3 launch from the Takesaki Center at the Tanegashima Space Center.
53、52、51、
現在
450
各系ともロケット打ち上げの最終作業を行っています。また警戒区域の安全は確認されています。
All systems are now in final operations. All
440
safety measures were confirmed in the restricted areas.
フライングしちゃいました。
430、29、28、27、26、25、24、23、22、
T-minus 7 minutes and counting.
420、19、18、17、
安全系準備完了。
Terrain safety system is ready.
13、12、11、410、409、408、
車上系準備完了。
Terrain system is ready.
405、404、403、402、401、400。
This HTV-3 carries also the name Kanatori. That's what they nickname these HTVs. It stands for White Stork in Japanese. 6 minutes and 22 seconds before the launch of this rocket. Everything is reported green from the Japanese flight controllers.
370、
打ち
360、
上げ6。現在車上の天候は雨、気温摂氏 27.9 度、南南東の風毎秒1メートルです。 H2B ロケット3号機の打ち上げに問題はありません。
It's 6 minutes to launch. The current weather here is rainy. Temperature is 27.9 degrees Celsius. Wind is 1 meters per second from the south-southeast. We don't have any problem for launch.
330、
本日の打ち上げ予定時刻は日本時間の午前11時6分18秒です。
Today's scheduled liftoff time is 11:06, 18 a.m. Japan Standard Time.
310、309、308、307、306、305、304、303、302、301、300。
T-minus 5 minutes and counting.
5分前です。
It's 5 minutes to liftoff.
The teams are in their terminal countdown now.
準備完了。
The HTV-3 is ready.
290、89、88。
They just reported the temperature of 82.2 degrees Fahrenheit there at the launch pad. There is some rain in the area, as you can tell by the
81、
live view of the Tanegashima Space Center.
78、
自動カウントダウンシーケンス開始。
The automatic countdown sequence starts.
72、71、270、69、 68、67、
種子島宇宙センター竹崎総合司令塔から H2B ロケット3号機の打ち上げ状況をお伝えしております。
This is a live report of the HTV launch vehicle number 3 launch from the Takesaki Range Control Center at the Tanegashima Space Center.
52、51、
現在ロケットの管制は吉信発射管制塔から行われています。
The launch vehicle is currently controlled from the Yoshinobu Blockhouse.
42、41、240、39、38、37、36、35、34、33、32、31、230。220。
2 minutes, 3 minutes, and 30 seconds and counting.
210。200。190、89、88、87、86、85、84、83、82、81、180。
打ち上げ3分前です。
It's 3 minutes to lift off.
全システムの電源が外部から内部に切り替えられました。
The launch vehicle is switched to the internal power.
2 minutes and 44 seconds before the launch. The vehicle is now on internal power. At the moment of liftoff, 9:06 and 18 seconds, the International Space Station will be 255 statute miles over the South Pacific, just off the coast of Chile.
150。140、39、38、37、36、35、34、33、32、31、130。28、27、20、25、24。
2 minutes, 2 minutes and counting.
21、120、19、18、17、16、15、14、13、12、11、110、109、108、107、106、105、
2段
104、
液体酸素系、液体水素系、準
Liquid oxygen and hydrogen systems are ready.
97、95、94、93、92、
1 minute, 30 seconds and counting.
89、88、87、86、85、84、83、82、81、80、79、78、77、76、75、74、73、72、71、
フレームディフレクター冷却開始。
The launch deck flame deflector cooling starts.
66、65、64、
2 minutes, 1 minute and counting.
61、60、
1分前です。
It's 1 minute to lift off.
57、56、55、54、53、52、51、50、49、48、47、46、45、44、43、42、41、40、39、38、37、36、35、34、
2 minutes, 30 seconds and counting.
開始。
The launch deck water curtain starts.
29、28、27、26、25、24、23、22、21、20、19、18、17、
フライトモード
16、
オン。
Flight mode on.
14、13、
2 minutes, 10, 9, 8,
Thermal
7,
activation.
6,
システム
5,
All
4,
systems are ready.
3,
5、
2,
4、
1.
スタート。
Ignition.
0。
And liftoff. Liftoff of the HTV-3 on its way toward the International Space Station.
リフトオフ。
SRB ignition and liftoff.
すべての人類のために宇宙ステーション補給機コウノトリ3号機を搭載した H2B ロケット3号平成24年7月21日午前11時6分18秒に種子島宇 打ち上げられました。
For all mankind, we had the liftoff of the H-2B launch vehicle with the Konotori-3 on board from the Tanegashima Space Center at 11:06 and 18 seconds in the morning on July 21, 2012, Japan Standard Time.
打ち上げ以降、ロケットの管制は吉信発射管制塔から竹崎総合司令塔に引き継がれています。
After liftoff,
1 minute into the flight of the HTV-3, obviously it's in the clouds now. The weather there preventing us from seeing the HTV-3, but we're standing by. The solid rocket booster should burn out at 1 minute 54 seconds.
徐々に南東方向の太平洋上へ飛行しています。
the HTV is now flying over the Pacific Ocean to the southeast with its initial flight angle of 108.5 degrees.
ロケットは正常に飛行中であり、種子島地上局は正常にロケットの追尾を行っています。
The H-2B is flying normally, and the Tanegashima stations and Uchinola station are tracking the launch vehicle very well.
100
1 minute 50 seconds into the flight, standing by for confirmation of the SRB burnout. Separation should be shortly thereafter.
13 14 15
SRBA 燃焼終了。
SRB
SRB burnout confirmed. And there goes the first set of solid rocket boosters. It'll be followed by the second set.
第1ペア分離。SRBA
2 minutes 15 seconds into the flight.
and the second pairs of SLBAs were jettisoned.
Two minutes and 40 seconds into the flight. The next major milestone will be at 3 minutes and 40 seconds. That is when the fairing that is currently surrounding the HTV-3 up on top of the rocket will be separated. It'll be jettisoned and will fall away.
打ち上げ後3分が経過します。
3 minutes after liftoff,
第1段エンジンの燃焼、制御系、飛行経路も正常です。ロケットは順調に飛行を続けており、現在の 105km、秒速約 2.29km です。
the first stage engine combustion, attitude control, and flight trajectory are all normal. The flight goes very smoothly. Currently, altitude is about 100. Velocity is approximately 2.29 kilometers.
衛星フェアリング分離。
Payload fairing jettison.
Fairing separation confirmed. Once again, this is the shroud that surrounded HTV-3 for protection up on top of the rocket. So HTV-3 now exposed as the rocket continues its 15-minute and 11-second flight into space. At 5 minutes and 47 seconds, that is when the first stage engine will cut off. The first stage and second stage will separate just a few seconds after that at 5:54. And then shortly thereafter, right after the 6-minute mark, that is when the second stage engine will ignite. That will burn for pretty much the remainder of the flight up until the 14-minute 20-second mark. And that is when that engine will cut off. Here's live telemetry from the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency as they continue to monitor their rocket as it flies up into space.
It's
5 minutes after liftoff.
ロケットは順調に飛行を続けており、現在の高度は約 160km、秒速約 4.37km です。
The flight current altitude 160 kilometers. Velocity is approximately 4.37 kilometers per second.
5 minutes, 45 seconds into the flight. Everything looking good.
第1段エンジン燃焼停止。
First stage engine cut off.
And we have first stage cutoff and separation of the first and second stage.
ロケットから分離。
First and second stage is separation.
The second stage engine will now ignite.
第2開始。
Second stage engine ignition.
The visiting vehicle officer here in Mission Control confirming that the altitude of the HTV-3 is 200 kilometers. Currently flying about 5,300 meters per second. Everybody's reporting that the vehicle is under good control and everything is looking right down the middle. Just an incredibly cloudy day there at the Tanegashima Space Center. There was some rain in the area at the moment of liftoff. A very low cloud deck, as you saw. The vehicle disappeared into the clouds pretty quickly right after liftoff. You can see there's some rain showers there on the far right-hand side. Seven minutes and 20 seconds into the flight. Everything's still looking pretty good. Now 8 minutes into the flight. The second stage is still burning.
8分が経過しました。
It's 8 minutes after liftoff.
第2段エンジンの燃焼は正常。制御系、飛行経路も正常です。現在の高度は約 255km、秒速約 5.67km です。
The second stage engine combustion attitude control trajectory are all normal. Altitude is about 255 kilometers. Velocity is about 5.67 kilometers per second.
So the HTV-3 continuing to gain altitude now at 255 kilometers. It's moved about 5.67 kilometers per second. At 5.67 kilometers per second, about 3.5 miles per second. The orbital speed's 5 miles per second. That's what the station travels at. Just an incredible speed. It's roughly 17,500 miles per hour. 9 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight. Again, the second stage continuing to burn. This will continue up until the 14-minute, 20-second point in the flight. It'll shut down, and then separation between HTV-3 and its second stage will occur right at 15 minutes and 11 seconds. So we will continue to monitor the flight of this cargo carrier now headed toward the International Space Station. Everything is working right down the line.
It's 打ち上げ後10分が経過しました。
It's 10 minutes after liftoff.
ロケットは順調に飛行しています。ロケットは種子島内之浦の各地上局からの捕捉範囲を離れ、小笠原局およびグアム局から追尾されています。
The flight is progressing very smoothly. The launch vehicle is out of the tracking range of the Tanegashima stations and Uchinoura station, and Ogasawara and Guam stations are now tracking it.
approaching the 11-minute mark of the flight. As you heard our counterparts in Japan confirm, it is currently out of the range of the Tanegashima Tracking Center. It's being tracked by some ground stations now as it heads over the Pacific Ocean.
第2段エンジンの燃焼は正常、制御系、飛行経路も正常であり、ロケットは現在安定しています。現在の高度は約 287km、秒速約 6.45km です。
The second stage engine combustion, attitude control, and flight trajectory are all normal. The flight goes very smoothly. Current altitude is about 287 kilometers. Velocity is about 6.45 kilometers per second.
So the rocket now 287 kilometers. That's 178 miles. It is currently moving at 6.4 kilometers per second, or about 4 miles per second. Continuing to speed up as it heads down toward the southeast.
追尾を終了しました。現在、グアム局から追尾を行っています。
The Ogasawara station finished tracking, and the Guam station is now tracking the launch vehicle.
12 minutes, 15 seconds into the flight, everything looking good. We are standing by for that 14-minute and 20-second mark. That is when the second stage will cut off. And soon after that, the HTV-3 cargo carrier itself will separate from that second stage at 15 minutes, 11 seconds. And then it will be in its preliminary orbit, which again is 200 by 300 kilometers. That is 124 miles by 186 miles. Official launch time tonight was, as planned, 9:06 and 18 seconds. The International Space Station was 255 statute miles over the South Pacific Ocean, just off the coast of Chile. It's a live look inside the Tsukuba Space Center. They're just outside of Tokyo. That is the home of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. They're taking a look at their cargo vehicle as it continues to head into space 13 minutes and 22 seconds into the flight.
第2段エンジン燃焼停止。
Second stage engine cut off.
Second stage cutoff confirmed.
ロケットは現在完成飛行を続けています。
The launch vehicle is in coast flight.
Now 14 minutes and 32 seconds into the flight. We're standing by. The vehicle is currently coasting. We'll get confirmation here shortly that the HTV-3 has separated from the second stage itself.
HTV-3 分離。
HTV-3 separation.
HTV-3 has separated 15 minutes and 5 seconds into the flight. The team there in Japan celebrating the HTV-3 in its preliminary orbit, once again 200 by 300 kilometers.
国際宇宙ステーションへ向け、今希望の船で。
Here's a live look at it as it separates and continues on its orbit.
It was full of hope to the JAXA is waiting for its arrival.
これをもちまして
The team is confirming that HTV-3 did separate cleanly.
コウノトリ3号機の打ち上げ
So the whole liftoff and flight into space for this third cargo carrier as part of the HTV series went as expected, right down the line, everything green.
今後のコウノトリ3号機の状況につきましては、記者会見並びにプレスリリースにて発表いたします。
The flight status of the Konotori 3 will be announced at the press conference as well as through press releases.
種子島宇宙センター竹崎総合司令塔よりお伝えしました。ありがとうございました。
This report was from the Takesaki Center at the Tanegashima Space Center. Thank you very much for listening.
This is Mission Control Houston. Again, to summarize, liftoff of the HTV-3 occurred at 9:06 and 18 seconds this evening. The weather was really the only iffy thing there about tonight's launch. The cloud deck was pretty low. There was some rain in the area. It's very humid there. The temperature was about 82 degrees. We lost our visual of the rocket just a few seconds after liftoff, but that has happened before with these launches, including several different shuttle missions, if you remember back in history. But the flight of the HTV-3 went true and as expected. The teams there in Japan, as well as at the other control centers, including here in Houston, monitored everything. Everything went right down the timeline as expected. Everything now set up for the arrival of the HTV-3 coming up next week, just 1 week from today. This cargo vehicle will arrive in the vicinity of the station and will perform a series of rendezvous maneuvers and other fine-tuning of its orbit between now and then. The capture of the HTV currently scheduled for Friday morning at 7:04 a.m. Central Time, 8:04 a.m. Eastern Time. There will be 2 different Expedition 32 crew members involved in this. Joe Akaba will be the lead robotics person for the actual capture of HTV-3. After that takes place, he will hand over to Aki Hoshide. He will be responsible for actually bringing it in and installing it on the Harmony node itself. We will have 2 different broadcasts that day, the first one beginning at 6 a.m. Central Time that will lead us to our capture, again at 7:04. And then our live berthing coverage will begin at 9:30 a.m. Central Time. Of course, berthing will take place is a variable time depending on how fast the crew moves, but we'll have live coverage of it here on NASA television. So again, at 6 a.m. Central Time, live capture coverage, with capture taking place at 7:04, and then live berthing coverage at 9:30 a.m. Central Time here on NASA television. A couple of programming notes before we get ready to wrap up here on NASA television. We want to remind you that coming up on Sunday, that is when the Progress 47 will be undocking from the International Space Station, specifically the Piers docking compartment. It's going to be undocking and redocking just a day later. It's going to back out to 100 miles back behind and away from the station. We'll have live coverage of that beginning at 3 p.m. Central Time, with the undocking at 3:27. Then on Monday, it's going to redock, reapproach the station. We'll have live coverage beginning at 8:15 p.m. Central Time, with the actual redocking at 8:57. This is being done to test out brand new Coors equipment, both on board the Progress and inside the station. This will help simplify the automated rendezvous and docking process that these Progress and Soyuz go through. So they'll be testing that out, and then the final undocking will occur on Monday, July 30th. At 1:11 p.m. Central Time. And then on Wednesday, August 1st, we'll have launch coverage at 2:15 of the very next Progress, the Progress 48. It'll take up about 2.5 tons of supplies to the International Space Station, the launch at 2:35 p.m. And then an item of note, that Progress is actually going to be docking with the station that same day, just a few hours later. We'll have live coverage beginning at 7:45 p.m. Central Time. with the actual docking at 8:24 p.m. Central Time. So quite a bit of activity coming up for us here on NASA Television and the crew of Expedition 32. But again, we want to invite you to join us not only this weekend, but also 1 week from today on Friday morning as this HTV-3 arrives at the International Space Station and the crew gets ready to capture it and install it on the Harmony node. Coming up next here on NASA TV, we're going to have a replay of tonight's launch with some video of the HTV-3 as it heads up into space on a journey toward the International Space Station. We thank you for joining us. For the latest, log on to the NASA website at www.nasa.gov. We'll see you back here later. This is Mission Control Houston.
(3) 22 21 20 19 18 17
フライトモードオン。
Flight mode on.
14 13 12
駆動用電池起動。
Thermal batteries activation.
全システム準備完了。
All systems are ready.
5 4
メインエンジンスタート。
Main engine ignition.
0
SRB へ転換。 リフトオフ。
SRBA ignition and liftoff.
すべての人類のために宇宙ステーション補給機コウノトリ3号機を搭載した H2B ロケット3号機は平成24年21日午前11時6分18秒に種子島宇宙センターから打ち上げられました。
For all mankind, we had the liftoff of the H2B launch vehicle number 3 with the Konotori 3 on board from the Tanegashima Space Center at 11:06 and 18 seconds in the morning on July 21, 2012, Japan Standard Time.
打ち上げ以降ロケットの管制は吉信発射管制塔から竹崎総合司令塔に引き継がれ